Hello and welcome back to another live stream team news for Gameweek 33 plus. There's some very interesting quotes from the likes of Klopp. And as always, to talk us through that, I'm joined by Neale. How are you doing?
Not too bad, Andy. Yeah, had an absolutely terrible game week 32 in terms of my own team. So I'm quite glad that there's another deadline coming around to make me forget about my stupid omission of De Bruyne and Aubameyang. So I've
Ouch.
fallen quite a bit.
I at least
Yep.
had De Bruyne. I didn't have Aubameyang. It was a pretty bad week for me too. So yeah, I'm glad that the game weeks are kind of coming thick and fast now. They're not really drawn out like last week was. So hopefully it'll be okay. So yeah, we're just going to jump into it just really quickly before we do. We don't have press conferences even from Man City and Spurs yet, but probably get quotes later. So keep an eye out on the site. And on Fantasy Football Scout on Twitter as well. Links are all in the description, just for any up-to-date quotes on that. So hopefully we'll get some later. So we're going to kick off with the big team. So Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, let's start with Man United, caused, I would say, a minor panic on Twitter earlier. People trying to second-guess what he meant. Do you want to talk us through what he said in his press conference this morning?
Yeah, it's just sort of classic Solskjaer, really. Pretty non-committal in terms of actual names, apart from Jones and Twanzebe, who are going to be out for a while. He said United's got a couple of knocks and hinted that there might be a couple of changes. He said, don't be surprised if that happens. He did go on to say that it would be nice to name the same team that beat Brighton and Sheffield United, because I think there was an unchanged 11 for those two games. So he said it would be nice and an ideal to do that, but with the games coming thick and fast, I think with this being a very, very winnable game, where arguably you could get away with not quite naming your first 11, then it wouldn't be a huge shock to see one or two changes. I don't think it'll be wholesale like Man City, but you could possibly sort of look into the minutes and try and second guess what he's talking about. For example, Shaw started every game this season, one of just three players to have done that in League and Cup. He did come off against Brighton after 60 minutes, so that might be in his rest then. But yeah, there's hints and sort of little suggestions that he might make one or two changes. Of course, that is as much as he's going to give us. He did go on to talk about Mason Greenwood, prompted, of course. He didn't just bring him up, extolling his virtues as you'd expect, and saying that they've been giving him more and more exposure. Did say that they have to look after him as you'd expect. He's still a teenager, and he's not going to start every game, but you would argue that he's in United's first choice 11 now on current form, and given the opposition as well. I think you might have put a tweet up about this, Andy, saying that Greenwood's sort of better against these sort of also ran, shall we call them. James's pace is perhaps more suited to the counter-attacking games against the bigger team. So that may be in Greenwood's favour. Greenwood's no slouch himself, of course. But yeah, he could be one of the options that might be rotated. They have got options like James. They've got Pereira, who's hardly like for like. Matter as well. They could shift things around. So he'd be one of the ones you'd think might be at risk. But there's no guarantees. This might be just classic killology from Solskjaer. We've learned the hard way in the past that he's talked about players who are doubts and then just named the same team again. So it can only be as good as his word, really. We're just taking him at face value on those comments, and don't be surprised if there is one or two changes based on his press conference this morning.
Yeah, and he has said before, I think it was a few days ago or maybe even last week, that the likes of Ighalo could play instead of Martial. He's a goal scorer, etc. But I don't know. This hasn't really changed my plans, to be honest. I'm planning on captaining Fernandes this week, and that hasn't. These quotes haven't changed that. I know it's maybe a bit different if you were thinking of someone like Martial, because in the past, a long time ago, this season, we've seen him be injury prone before, but I just don't buy it. I know what you're saying about Solskjaer. He says one thing and then something different happens, and if he's got any way to play that same 11, he will play it, because top four really looks on now with Leicester, Chelsea dropping points, etc. So I think Greenwood, if you're paying 4.3 million, then you can maybe expect the odd game or two. Like James could come in, but yeah, that's kind of what I was saying, that against these teams that are probably going to try and defend rather than attack us, he can create something out of nothing, as he did against Brighton, whereas James is just doesn't really have more than one string to his bow, I would say. So yeah, I'm not expecting to see him feature that regularly, but at the same time, I wouldn't be completely shocked if Greenwood misses a match. over the next 2 or 3.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there about the top 4. And I think those 4 clubs that we think are tussling for a Champions League spot now, Wolves, Chelsea, Leicester and United, you'd think rotation would be few and far between with those 4 teams, because they can't afford to drop any points really between now and 38. The good thing about United as well, I should mention, is that their recovery time between games is fairly generous. So they were in action on Tuesday. They've had 4 days to recover for this. They then don't play again until next Thursday against Villa, and then they're not playing again until next Monday after that. So they've got probably the best recovery times at the moment for the next 3 games than any club in the division, really. So that is in their favour as well with regards to recovery times and rotation.
Yeah, and we've also, really quickly before we move on, I don't want to spend the whole show on Man United, but obviously Fernandes did play a lot in the FA Cup, but then he came off on 60-ish minutes for Brighton. Martial only played 24 minutes in that Norwich game as well in the FA Cup, so they've had a bit of rest. I think that's what we're likely to see. Try and put the game to bed by 50, 60 minutes, and then they're off, and they go again, but we'll see. Anyway, let's move on to another team in red. Liverpool, awful result for them last night. Not that it matters, they've already got the league in the bag, but Klopp was not happy afterwards. You could see the way he kind of responded to the questions. Maybe the questions weren't great, but I think it was more to do with the result. What's he said today? Because it's very interesting quotes, because people are obviously worried about rotation coming up.
Yeah, this is why I'm slightly late starting today, because this was the last press conference of the afternoon. Klopp delivered it at 2:00. Mostly stuff that wouldn't interest fantasy managers. It was just about the City game. No real indications as to how he set his team up for Villa until the very last question before the embargo, which was about playing the youngsters. So an inevitable question, really, and something we've been pondering ourselves with regards to rotation in the running. Reporter asked him if the likes of Williams and Jones can expect to see game time. He got a bit animated in response. He says he wouldn't expect like the Solskjaer and Lampard to be asked these questions. But he was quite forceful in saying that they don't give Premier League games away as Christmas presents. Those were his words. And that he would pick the best 11 on the day. Now, I think that little end bit of that sentence where he says the best 11 on the day or on the pitch basically paves the way for some sort of rotation. Especially as they were in action just last night and then they've got to do it all again this weekend. So I do think there will be changes. I think that's inevitable this weekend. But I don't think you're going to see an entire team of academy products like we saw, for example, in the FA Cup against Everton with a few fringe players thrown in. I think it'll be more the case of resting 2 or 3 of the big guns in one game and then doing the same with another lot the following match. So, for example, you might get Firmino arrested one game, there might be Mane's turn the next, and then Salah's after that. I don't think there'll be wholesale changes. He did say, I mean, one of my caveats for the rotation angle was that he'd want to respect the integrity of the league. They're playing Villa this weekend. Villa's in a relegation scrap, so you'd think he'd want to kind of do the rest of the league a favour. They've also got Brighton as well, who are down there. But he said that wasn't a concern of his. It was more the fact that they want to win games themselves. They have got this record points total to go for. So he's not going to name a team purely to help out the rest of the relegation strugglers down there, at least not according to him. And he sort of poo-pooed the suggestion that he was going to be just giving away appearances willy-nilly for Premier League medal sakes, for example. But, it will happen. There will be rotation. Just expect that, I think, with their Man City in the running. But I doubt very much where it's going to be like Curtis Jones playing every week, Nico Williams playing, 5 out of the remaining 6 instead of Alexander-Arnold. I just think they'll be interspersed with the regulars now and again, perhaps starting this weekend. But it'll still be a competitive 11, I think. It's just we don't know which of these players is going to be rested.
Yeah, is it changing any of your plans with captaincy or transfers, Liverpool players, or are you just keeping them and hoping for the best?
Yeah, keeping and hoping. I think I've got Salah and Alexander-Arnold. Salah would have been in the equation if it had been a normal game week for the captaincy. But I settled on Bruno Fernandes as soon as I saw him come off against Brighton on Tuesday. And then after watching Bournemouth against my own team, Newcastle, on Wednesday, I think that really That really solidified it, because Villa actually haven't been that bad defensively since the restart. They've tightened up a bit. I think 4 goals conceded in 4 games, which isn't too bad. This will be the biggest test of all. I still expect Liverpool to win comfortably, but Bournemouth, for example, have let in is it 6 against Palace and Newcastle? So that they're 2 of the lowest scorers teams in the division. And I know they're not quite as bad against the bigger teams. Bournemouth, they've picked up points in the past, but I do think it's the standout fixture, and I'd be slightly more confident about Fernandes getting a start than I am Salah. Even if I do think there'll be minutes for both of them this weekend. So I've made a complete mess of it last week by switching the armband off Fernandes at the last minute for Rashford. So I'm not doing that this week. I'm sticking on Fernandes. I'm just going with my first instinct, and then not touching it from now on.
Yeah, very, very similar situation for me with the captaincy. I think really quickly on Liverpool for me, there will be some rotation. I think you can frame it either way you want. After last night, Klopp might just think, right, I'm going to teach these guys a lesson. The ones that he maybe didn't think played very well, and drop them. He doesn't really seem like that kind of manager. He seems like he'd want to give them a chance to go out and prove themselves. Although he did hook Gomez, I think it was at half time actually, wasn't it? Yeah. Who really had a poor game. So whether he'll start the next one, we'll have to wait and see. My thinking is, again, he probably will, because you want to give him that confidence back. You don't want to just take him out of the team for having a poor performance against the best team or the second best team in the league. So we'll have to wait and see. I'm the same. I'm not captain in Liverpool players, so I'm okay keeping them for now. In a few weeks, that may change. We'll have to wait and see what happens this week. I mean, if Salah goes and scores a hat-trick against Villa, I will change my tune very, very quickly. Let's go to the other side of Liverpool. Everton. Obviously, Richarlison came off. I can't remember exactly what time. I think it was in the first half against Leicester. Is there any news on him?
Yeah, just after half time, I think it was, sort of 55-minute mark. So, yeah, Ancelotti seemed confident after the game, and even more so today. He said he hasn't actually trained this afternoon, but he will train, or he thinks he'll be able to train on Saturday and Sunday. Everton's in action on Monday night against Spurs. He did sort of send out mixed messages, and he said he's not going to have any problems to play. And then later in the sentence said, I think he'll be fine. So that think is obviously the element of doubt, but it's just a knock. I mean, that's all it is. So I do think he'll be fine to recover. Everton's also got Sidibe back for this game. I doubt, well, you'd think he would be doubtful to feature, because Coleman's been really good since the restart, and that back four's been very solid, and just 1 goal conceded. And they're still without Walcott and Delph, but apart from that, no new injuries to report.
Yeah, defence very good. There's an article, I mentioned this on the Scoutcast match day, but for anyone who didn't catch that, I think Tom Freeman wrote that Everton have conceded, apart from Wolves and Man United, the fewest big chances since Ancelotti came in. So defensively, they've been sound for quite a while now. So I mean, Spurs probably not the best fixture to bring defenders in for, but yeah, maybe in a few weeks we could be looking at Holgate, Lucas Digne, etc. Let's talk about the team that they played last week, who have been, I mean, Leicester have just been, I think it's fair to say, pretty awful, at least in terms of the results they've had since the restart. So James Maddison's had injuries, as well as James Maddison and maybe any other injuries. Are you expecting to see any changes to the lineup? Because it feels like Rodgers, almost like he has to change something. Like top four is really kind of slipping out their grasp at this point.
Yeah, he might do. I mean, he started with sort of a familiar shape against Everton, but then moved to, he kind of matched them in the second half, 4-4-2, brought Iheanacho on alongside Vardy. Looked much better. Him and Maddison looked very good. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Iheanacho start. Maddison would have started, but apparently he's aggravated his hip problem. Now, he was a doubt for the midweek game. He only came off the bench in the second half because he'd been a doubt for that match. But he's aggravated it again, so he looks doubtful for this. I think he will miss this one, based on Rodgers' comments. Hopefully not going to be out for long if he does miss out. So that could dictate what formation Rodgers plays. So, I mean, I could have seen like a diamond, for example, if Maddison was fit with Pratt, Tielemans and Ndidi. Because Harvey Barnes has really not captured the form he had before lockdown. He was hooked, I think, at halftime, I believe, in midweek. And I would have doubts about him starting if Maddison was fit. Whether or not Maddison missing out is in Barnes' favour, it might be. But there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, in that team. Apart from the back four, I think they're pretty settled. purely based on injuries because Pereira's out. But I think a lot of week-to-week uncertainty in midfield. He's already shifted formation a couple of times since the resumption. Barnes getting benched and then getting hooked repeatedly. So, a lot of uncertainty there. And as I said, they looked a lot better with Iheanacho up front on, when was it? Wednesday, I think. So either alongside Vardy or, as I wrote in the scout notes, unthinkably, maybe even instead of him. I do think it'll be the former. If anything, it'll be like a two-man strike force. But Vardy's been very poor.
It did kind of. I was trying to I was doing the match day scoutcast while half watching it and trying to check up on the stats and stuff as it went. And in the first half, there was a stat that popped up that Everton had crossed the ball from open play once, and Leicester had done it 11 times in the first half. So it felt like, because when they have Maddison, they don't. That's not really their play. They usually just try and get the ball in behind to Vardy, Barnes, whoever it might be. But that just wasn't happening against Everton, and they were a bit better in the second half. But and I've just said, to be fair, that Everton have been pretty good defensively. And they did in the first half, at least. They pretty much dealt with everything. It was really just Pickford making more than one mistake that kind of helped Leicester. So I mean, right now, I personally wouldn't be looking at any of their fixtures. I think they play, or any of their players. I think they play Crystal Palace at home, isn't it, this week? So potentially a clean sheet there because it's Crystal Palace. But otherwise, Vardy just looks like too much money at the moment. Let's talk about Southampton quickly, because Hasenhüttl was in my bad books after mentioning changes the week before, and then straight after the game saying Ings is going to play every single game for the Golden Boot. I don't know if that's the exact quote, but it was something like that. So any news from there? Any news on Danny Ings maybe getting a rest at some point?
I haven't seen it in full yet. I'll transcribe this late. This was one of a cluster of press conferences happening at 1:30. I mean, there's like 5 at the same time, so haven't seen them all yet. But I have seen the headline team news, and it's just Buffal and Højbjerg, who are still doubts. They missed out in, was it last Saturday, I think it was, they played, or last Sunday. So they've had a decent recovery period. Hasenhüttl had said previously that Ings is going to feature in all 6 games. Now, that's not necessarily starting, but he seems very keen on helping them towards the push for a golden boot. So, all those reservations we had about Ings possibly being benched a few times during this run-in might have been misfounded, which is annoying because I sold him just ahead of his 2 double-digit hauls. Yeah. So, I'll see if there's anything more comes up from that. I'll listen to that in full later on. But it doesn't sound like he's injured or anything, and they've had a generous recovery time with last week, so probably ready to go again.
Yeah, I imagine he's definitely going to play the next one. Man City at home is a tough one, but he hasn't scored. People keep telling me he's fixture proof. He didn't score against Man United or Man City in the reverse fixtures. He does have both those teams coming up in the next 3, so it'd be interesting to see whether he really, really is fixture proof and form over fixtures and all that. So it'll be a good test for him the next few games. Let's talk about Chelsea. There's a lot of love for Pulisic at the moment. I suppose it's more so the kind of lineup predictions rather than. Obviously, injury news is important as well. But do you expect them to make any changes? A poor result against West Ham. Alonso started, I think, like the last 5, 6, maybe even 7 league games at this point. But Chelsea fans, as always, on his back about how good he actually is. Are you expecting to see any changes from Lampard for this one?
Yeah, it could be. I think there generally is. I think despite his reputation as being a bit of a tinkerer, he does tend to start with the players who are in form a lot. I mean, I've made a point about this before. So Abraham and Mount were playing twice a week, every week, for much of the season, even during the Champions League group stages. Willian as well was doing that. Pulisic played, I think, in every game from late October to mid-December, when he was in his purple patch as well. That was both Champions League and Premier League games. So he's got previous for playing the in-form players. And I think, especially as we mentioned earlier about Man United, Chelsea's going for this top 4, top 5 place. They can't afford to drop any more points. They've done it already this week against West Ham. So I think the real sort of key integral players will start, and I think Pulisic is among them. I mean, he's looked excellent in the last 3 game weeks. I mentioned this, I think, in my first wildcard draft, Andy, were you before we started? He was in there. My only concern about him was whether he was in Lampard's first choice starting 11 and as a regular, and I think we've now established that probably is the case. He might get one benching in the running, but I do think he'll start the bulk of them, providing he maintains that level of form. But I wouldn't expect, for example, I would expect Giroud to come back in for Abraham. I think Mount will probably come back in as well. He was benched in midweek. Alonso possibly could drop out. I think the only thing in his favour is Reece James hasn't really looked particularly sharp since the restart. He had a problem in the warm-up matches. He didn't really feature much, and he looked very rusty in his 2 appearances to date. I think he came on against Villa, didn't he, late in the game, looked off it, and then he was hooked at half-time in the FA Cup. So that would be the only thing in Alonso's favour. I think ordinarily it would be James and Azpilicueta as the 2 first-choice fullbacks. I think really if everyone's fully fit long term. But that's the thing to cling on to, I think, if you're an Alonso owner, because James has kind of looked a bit rusty, I think, since we resumed.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have been that much favour like since the restart. I guess Alonso is one of those ones that everyone always wants to punt on, and Chelsea do have some pretty good fixtures from now, pretty much to the end of the season as well. But I mean, I don't know. Even for an attacking defender like Alonso, I'd always want clean sheets. I'm just not sure they're going to be there for Chelsea. They'll probably win the majority of the games, but how many of them will have a clean sheet? I personally wouldn't be so sure. So if I was targeting anyone, I know people are looking at William, but I just think Pulisic is the standout. And I think Pulisic's even 0.1 million cheaper as well. So that's where my money would be if you're going for someone. Before we just kind of go through all of the rest, I don't think there's anything else major. But Sheffield United got a few injuries, a few new injuries as well. And is there anything about O'Connell yet from Chris Wilder? So we keep talking about him, but he's still not back.
Yeah, this is a bit like sort of Solskjaer with Martial,
Yeah. I was thinking that earlier. Pogba as well.
Week. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Pogba, probably even better example. You get updates every week, and he says he's really close to a comeback, but he still hasn't featured. Now, a couple of weeks ago, he rubbish suggestions that O'Connell was out for the season, but we've only got another 3 weeks left in terms of real life calendar terms. Apparently, he has been back on the grass and he's edging closer, but no update today, as far as I've heard. I did listen to the whole thing, but unless I've missed something, there was no mention of him. And Robinson's been in such good form as well as a left-sided centre-back, and I think he will continue there unless there's been a miraculous recovery. Given the quick turnaround, there's only been what will be less than 72 hours between Sheffield United's 2 games. So I haven't heard anything new about him, and in the absence of any fresh information, I would just assume that Robinson's going to continue there. However, there has been other injuries for Sheffield United. Big ones from an FPL perspective, even if Lundstrom's not quite as popular as he was. Fleck and Luke Freeman are all going to be out for 2 weeks, along with Leon Clark, who's a reserve striker. So that midfield really picks itself now. So Sander Berger and Ben Osborne will probably be continuing alongside Oliver Norwood, and they've got their first choice defence and wing backs back now, apart from O'Connell, and I think that showed last night because they looked a lot more secure against Spurs. Yes, Tottenham were awful, but if you think of the game so far, they've had bad luck. They kept a clean sheet against Villa. They were reduced to 10 men against Newcastle when they were at 0-0. They then didn't have Henderson and Egan for the Man United game, and then as soon as they got these players back from injury, they looked a lot more solid last night. So probably no coincidence. And they've just got O'Connell as the missing piece of that jigsaw. But yeah, maybe Robinson continuing there for now. And Lundstrom, as I said, they're out for 2 weeks, which will probably rule him out for the best part of 4 or 5 game weeks.
The death of the king. It's happened.
Yeah. I think he'll still feature in many people's end of season teams. I think there's no doubt about that. But this might be the last we see of him in the starting 11, because I think Berg came in last night and did very, very well. Starting to really look the part now. Not just his goal, but I think his all-round display. And this might be his death knell as a FPL asset, because next season is going to be, a 5.5?
At least, 6? Midfielder.
Yeah.
He'd be in no one's teams. Absolutely no one's. I must admit, I love not having to worry about him now, because obviously I didn't have him for so long, so I don't even have to look at the Sheffield United team sheet anymore. The one thing, I do really quickly, I do think they looked much better against Spurs, despite obviously Spurs helping that by being awful. But Sheffield United controlled the game for a lot yesterday. So I was playing Taylor at home to Sheffield United Sorry, I'm actually thinking of switching and playing Egan instead. Because as we're going to come on to Burnley in a minute, they've still got quite a few injuries. So yeah, that's my only decision for Sheffield United. Anyway, I don't think there's any major injury news from the rest. So should we just kind of rattle through them, and I'll just bring the images up as we go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Arsenal. Arteta was one of 3 managers to hold their press conferences yesterday. Chambers, Pablo Mari, Martinelli, and Leno are out for probably the season. In all those cases, Leno might be back for game week 38, but looks unlikely. Özil is going to be a late fitness check with a back problem. And Arteta said there was a few issues from Norwich and sort of cited the quick turnaround period. But we saw, for example, the likes of Pepe and Nketiah, who else, Saka, all benched for that Norwich game, probably because that was the more winnable match and a game you could get away with naming it sort of not a second string team, but resting a few players. And this is the much tougher game against Wolves. So I would probably expect to see, some of those players return. But otherwise, no fresh injuries to report. I think Torreira's back as well from injury. Villa, Target's going to be out for probably the next week. He's going to be replaced by Neale Taylor, almost certainly. Apart from that, I don't think they've got any new injury concerns. Engels, we think, is still out, as well as Wesley and Heaton. Bournemouth, classic Harry.
I love this. When I saw this, I thought, Neil's going to have a great time talking about this now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised, really, because it's just every week. Callum Wilson's still out. It's his last match of his 2-match ban. Simon Francis as well, I think, is a concern. But Hardy Howe said they've got 1 or 2 problems, and then the reporter asked subsequently, "Who are they? Like, can you tell me who they are?" And he just said no. So that's it. We don't know who these people are. Yeah, could be Billen. He came off at half time against Newcastle, and he'd been struggling previously, so he might be one of the ones he's talking about. But who knows with him? Potter again. Anger had his yesterday. Davy Proper is a slight concern with a cough problem. Expected to be fit though. He's been back in training, and Webster might return as well. He missed out in against Man United, but he's been back in training as well. I think Potter expects both of those players to return, and you might say some folk returning like Neil Maupay and Aaron Moy as well. I think Potter probably targeted, much like Arteta did with Norwich, targeted this weekend as the more important game, sort of sacrificed the Man United game to an extent. So you'll see probably Neil Maupay back up top. Burnley, as you hinted at there, getting better slightly. So they said that Goodmanson, Brady, and Wood might feature. I think Goodmanson's got the best chance, but it'll probably just be as a substitute. I think Dyche used the words "in some capacity," so I think that was just hinting at a bench role. He's been out for so long as well. I can't imagine him being thrown straight back in. Wood and Brady might not make it, but they're sort of 50-50. They're back on the grass at least. Barnes and Loughton remain out. Rodriguez could be back. He missed out against Palace with a hamstring problem, but he's been back in training the last 2 days, and Dyche said he's hopeful he should feature. I've seen another quote from a different interview saying he should feature, so he probably is going to be back. But with players returning, they've also lost somebody else, or might have lost somebody else. Jack Cork, who's a central midfielder, he came off with an ankle problem against Palace. Dyche said he was a question mark, so not ruled out by any stretch, but I think previously when Burnley's players have been sort of 50-50, Dyche hasn't risked them. So, I mean, he might rush him back given how short numbers they are, but yeah, it could be some more square pegs and round holes. We saw Peters playing on the left wing last week, McNeil playing as like a number 10, so could be more of that sort of thing going on for Burnley, who still keep racking up the clean sheets regardless. Palace, Benteke is fit, so he might come back in for a trip to Leicester. Martin Kelly making big strides according to Hodgson, but doesn't sound like he's ready yet. I think he's just been back in training partly today, not doing the full session, and he wouldn't probably reclaim his place anyway because he looks to be down a pecking order now at both right back and centre half. Schlupp and Tompkins are the only long-term ones. Man City, you've mentioned there, we won't probably hear from until tonight, maybe. Hopefully it is tonight, the embargoed section of yesterday's press conference.
Just really quickly, right? Let's talk about Man City for a sec.
Yeah.
I know it's impossible to predict, but I mean, okay. Let's just see if you think the same as what a lot of people are thinking. De Bruyne played again. I think he played the whole game actually. Maybe he played the whole game. Are you expecting him to miss out? And is Mahrez like a shoe in to come in? Is that going to be your prediction, or do you think De Bruyne's got a good chance of starting again?
You never really know with Pep, because sometimes he benches players twice in a row. He sometimes likes players with rhythm to play. I know that this has happened in the past where you think, oh, Aguero's been benched, so he's got to start the next game, and he didn't. But having said that, so Man City's just played 3 games, 2 against Chelsea and Liverpool, sort of tough games in the league. Well, not so much last night. And then an FA Cup match in which he went full strength again. So De Bruyne has started all 3. Sterling started all 3 as well. And the 2 fullbacks as well, Mendy and Walker, I think as well. I think I'm right in saying that. So I do think there will be changes. The one thing in De Bruyne's favour is that they haven't really got someone like him who can play that role, sort of either on the right side of centre midfield or behind the strikers, as was last night. Whereas out wide, they have got options. So Mahrez and Bernardo, for example, both rested last night. Foden can play out wide, as well as Sterling, as well as Jesus. So there's more options out wide than there is in central midfield, I think. David Silva, you'd expect to come back in as well. Now, I haven't properly written the team news yet for Man City, but once I sort of clear last week's lineup from the database, I tend to sort of make a half guess at what I think the team will be. And I haven't got De Bruyne in the lineup at the moment.
Oh, big call.
Because, yeah, I know. And you know what? I do think he's going to get a rest at some point. He's been managed during games. So I think he came off after 60 minutes against Newcastle, around about that point anyway. And I think it was something similar against Chelsea. No, he played the full. I think he played the full lot, didn't he?
I can't quite remember against Chelsea, but I think he's had a couple of times where he's come off over all the matches. Yeah.
Chelsea Liverpool, he played the full 90 minutes. Newcastle in the cup, he did come off early, so did have a bit of a breather then. I just think why was he going to risk De Bruyne with the Champions League coming up? Yes, he wants to keep the match short. He wants to keep the momentum going. But can you see him starting all 6 games?
No. So I don't think you can. I don't think you can expect that from any Man City player. My thinking is there is a chance it's this week enough where. Would he be my captain anyway? I don't know, but I would have considered him if he'd just had a rest, for example. I probably would consider it. So in some ways, I'm actually hoping he does get a rest, so that maybe next week, Newcastle at home, that could be a good captain. Yeah. I think once it's happened, I'd expect him to start a few more. I know what you're saying, they can always bench him twice in a row. I'm just not sure that's going to happen with De Bruyne, of all people.
No, I don't think it would with De Bruyne.
Yeah, so that's my hope is basically this week, I think. You've already mentioned, obviously, Liverpool rotation potential. De Bruyne maybe. Man City, obviously, always a problem. They've literally played as well. Get your bench in order. That's what because I've got a few I don't know what everyone else's team's like, but I've got a couple of players on my bench that I could potentially even play. So I'm making sure I've got them in the right order just in case. So I think there's a chance for De Bruyne, but I mean, we could sit here for an hour or two and talk about Man City and never get it right. So
I think basically he'll start probably 4 or 5 of the remaining 6 games. It's just when those rotations going to occur. Now, the thing I'm thinking more about this week and next week, so Southampton and Newcastle, 33 and 34, they're 2 teams who are not on the beach, but, they're comfortably mid-table. Nothing is riding on these games. The 4 games after that are all against teams fighting for relegation. Now, is Pep someone who would necessarily think about that? Klopp doesn't seem to. I mean, he's just said that himself, but that would be my only concern. He can probably get away with naming a team in terms of respecting the integrity of the league. Maybe I'm thinking too much into this. Maybe I'm giving him too much
That's what
credit.
we do, though. If you can't be an FPL manager unless you overthink every little bit.
Yeah.
I just I don't know. I suppose the thing with Pep and Man City is he could change the whole 11 and still beat those 4 sides. So we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, last thing on De Bruyne, he did bench him against Burnley, coming within the 5-0. That came immediately after the Arsenal game. But the fixtures are so good, and He's been coming on in games he hasn't started, so he can do damage off the bench. And I would suggest keep him. I mean, I really regret selling him now. I might even get him back in for Newcastle, I think, for the 34 if he gets benched this weekend. So, yeah, just expect a bench or two in the running, as you'd expect for most players, I think. It just could come this weekend based on the fact that he's played 3 games in a row.
Yeah, I'm certainly not put off by the rotation enough to ignore their players. I already have De Bruyne, and I'm looking to get Mahrez in this week as well, so I'm going to hopefully have 2. So yeah, we'll leave the team news there. So your transfer is going to be Mahrez, is it? How are you getting him in?
Well, I've got Sarr as well, and my problem with Sarr is that he's got good fixtures from 34 to 36. It's just Watford have just been dreadful since the restart. So my 2 moves could be Son and Sarr out for Pulisic and Mahrez.
That's it. That's
I like the look.
Job done.
Yeah, I like the look of. I'm loath to sell Son, but Everton's been so good defensively, and Coleman's been very good as well since the restart. He'd be up against Son, you'd think. And Spurs just looked. I mentioned this on Twitter last night. They looked as they had after the honeymoon period. When Mourinho first came in, and then the wheels started to come off. So around Christmas time, it looked a bit like that. Now I do think Son's going to score a couple of games this season, and he's got back-to-back assists for me, so he's doing all right. But I just worry about Spurs. I think more than I do Chelsea and Man City, for example.
Yeah, I think a lot of Sun owners will be thinking the same, and it is a tough one because they have Bournemouth after Everton, which looks like a really good fixture. And I thought against West Ham, I thought as a team they looked a bit better, and I was thinking, right, if they take this into Sheffield United, then maybe I'll start looking at them. But obviously, we saw what happened last night, so it's a tough one, obviously, because you don't want to get rid of Sun. But as a combo, Pulisic and Mahrez seems better than Sun and Sarr. But
I think so. The money goes a long way, doesn't it? It's just the fact that he's so expensive. I do think that Bournemouth game's such a good fixture. I'll just finish the team news. I didn't actually finish going through it.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. No, it's my fault. I started talking about Man City. Newcastle, Joe Linton, Lascelles and Longstaff are fresh concerns, possibly Manquillo as well. So Lascelles will be the major one, I think, for fantasy managers because he's in quite a lot of teams and a decent fixture this week as well. So he's got I saw contrasting reports. One said he's got a nasty cut. Another said he's got a knock. So he'll be assessed. I think Joe Linton's got a calf problem. Longstaff's almost certainly going to miss out. This is the elder and less ginger, one of the two. Manquillo had a muscle problem, I think, after the game against Bournemouth, but it wasn't acknowledged today, at least not what I've seen so far. Norwich, no fresh concerns. Leitner, I think, is out for the season, along with Byram, Zimmerman, and somebody else, Hanley. Sheffield United, we've covered.
I think it's just Wolves. I think it's just Wolves and West Ham. Wolves, I don't think there was any new concerns, right? I think
and Watford, Watford, Wolves fine, clean bill of health, going to Santo, so all good there. West Ham, Masuaku, Haller, and Noble all back in training. Moyes says some of those should recover. He's just not sure which ones yet. Felipe Anderson's a fresh doubt after overstretching in the warm up. I saw. Yeah, Watford, I think the last one. So. Nothing really new. So the long-term ones, Janmat, Delafio and Success out for the season. They're going to welcome back the 3 players who they were omitted last week, who, they had a lockdown party, apparently. And Watford put out a statement saying they were not selected because of health and safety grounds. I think it was more disciplinary. So it's, Chalobah, Andre Gray and Domingos Quina as well. They're all back in the first team fold. But no fresh injuries report from Watford.
Nice, yeah. That's a lot of stuff covered today. I was just going to address some things in chat. Someone was talking rubbish about Rashford, reckons their mate seen him not training. Something tells me that's not true, given lockdown and people being at training seems very unlikely. I can confirm it's not Jimenez that's pregnant, it's his partner that's pregnant. I just can't see him missing any games given the position Wolves are in right now, but you never know. We'll have to wait and see. And yes, I do look at the questions in the chat, but it's not. There's a lot of team news to get through, so we can't answer every single question. And lastly, when you said you were getting rid of Son, everyone or a few people think that's a mistake. Son is fixture proof. Not the right week to get rid of Son. So I thought I'd add that in for some mind games for you at the end.
Yeah, it's a valid opinion. I think it's possibly true as well. It does feel a bit like chasing points, but I mean, say Son's got back-to-back assists without having played particularly well, which just shows how potent he can be. I think it's just the fact that He's what 9.7, 9.8, something like that.
Yeah, it's quite. It just
And
feels expensive at the moment.
yeah, the money goes a long way. That Bournemouth game is the off-putting thing. It's such a good fixture, but I do think Everton will be a tough nut to crack on Monday. And yeah, it's just Pulisic at home to Watford. That's really, really catching my eye.
Yeah, I'm looking at Spurs players for that Bournemouth game. Maybe even Harry Kane got a brace last night. Should be a brace anyway. Scored in the game before that as well. So yeah, I'm kind of looking at him. But look, we'll leave it there. That was really good. Obviously, as always, follow Fantasy Football Scout on Twitter. Links in the description below for all the up-to-date team news in case there's any embargo quotes and stuff later. Obviously, Neale will have the team news section looking pristine and extremely accurate later on with the 100% lineup news as well. So make sure to check that out.
Those things are true.
Well, almost. And then last little plug. Tomorrow, me and Az are on Breakfast Club at 10 a.m. So slightly earlier. It's not going to be over the deadline. But me and Az, and I tell you now, I've seen his transfers. It's worth coming to watch, basically. Anyway, I can't even speak anymore, so we're going to go. Thanks for joining us, Neale.
Cheers, Andy. See you, bye.
And we'll see you all later. Good luck in Game Week 33.